had told her that Herat, the city where Miriam was born in 1959, had been the cradle of Persian culture, the home of writers, painters, and Sufis. You couldn't stretch a leg there without poking a poet in the ass, he laughed. Jalil told her the story of the Queen Gauhar Shad, who had raised the famous minarets in her loving ode to Herat back in the 15th century. He described to her the green wheat fields of Herat, the orchards, the vines pregnant with plump grapes, the city's crowded, vaulted bazaars. There is a pistachio tree, Jalil said one day, and beneath it, Miriam Joe is buried none other than the great poet Yami. He leaned in and whispered, Yami lived over 500 years ago. He did. I took you there once, to the tree. You were little. You wouldn't remember. It was true, Miriam didn't remember. And though she would live the first 15 years of her life within walking distance of Herat, Miriam would never see this storied tree. She would never see the famous minarets up close, and she would never pick fruit from Herat's orchards or stroll in the fields of wheat. But whenever Jalil talked like this, Miriam would listen with enchantment. She would admire Jalil for his vast and worldly knowledge. She would quiver with pride to have a father who knew such things. What rich lies, Nana said after Jalil left. Rich man telling rich lies. He never took you to any tree. And don't let him charm you. He betrayed us, your beloved father. He cast us out. He cast us out of his big fancy house like we were nothing to him. He did it happily. Miriam would listen dutifully to this. She never dared say to Nana how much she disliked her talking this way about Jalil. The truth was that around Jalil, Miriam did not feel like a harami. For an hour or two every Thursday, when Jalil came to her, all smiles and gifts and endearments, Miriam felt deserving of all the beauty and bounty that life had to give. And for this, Miriam loved Jalil. Even if she had to share him, Jalil had 3 wives and 9 children, 9 legitimate children, all of whom were strangers to Miriam. He was one of Herat's wealthiest men. He owned a cinema, which Miriam had never seen, but at her insistence, Jalil had described it to her. And so she knew the facade was made of blue and tan terracotta tiles, and that it had private balcony seats and a trellised ceiling. Double swinging doors opened into a tiled lobby where posters of Hindi films were encased in glass displays. On Tuesdays, Jalil said one day, kids got free ice cream at the concession stand. Nana smiled demurely when he said this. She waited until he left the kolba before snickering and saying, the children of strangers get ice cream. What do you get, Miriam? Stories of ice cream. In addition, very nice, huh? In addition to the cinema, Jalil owned land in Karok, land in Farah, 3 carpet stores, a clothing shop, and a black 1956 Buick Roadmaster. He was one of Herat's best connected men, friend of the mayor and the provincial governor. He had a cook, a driver, and 3 housekeepers. Nana had been one of the housekeepers until her belly began to swell. When that happened, Nana said the collective gasp of Jalil's family sucked the air out of Herat. His in-laws swore blood would flow. The wives demanded that he throw her out. Nana's own father, who was a lowly stone carver in the nearby village of Guldaman, disowned her. Disgraced, he packed his things and boarded a bus to Iran, never to be seen or heard from again. Sometimes, Nana said early one morning as she was feeding the chickens outside the kolba, I wish my father had had the stomach to sharpen one of his knives and do the honorable thing. It might have been better for me. She tossed another handful of seeds into the coop, paused, and looked at Miriam. Better for you too, maybe. It would have spared you the grief of knowing that you are what you are. But he was a coward, my father. He didn't have the heart for it. Do we understand what she's wishing that her father had done? The honorable thing? To kill her. Jalil didn't have the dill either, Nana said, to do the honorable thing, to stand up to his family, to his wives and in-laws, and accept responsibility for what he had done. Instead, behind closed doors, a face-saving deal had quickly been struck. The next day, he had made her gather her few things from the servants' quarters, where she'd been living, and sent her off. You know what he told his wives the day by way of defense? That I forced myself on him, that it was my fault. Dee Dee, you see, this is what it means to be a woman in this world. Nana put down the bowl of chicken feed. She lifted Miriam's chin with a finger. Look at me, Miriam. Reluctantly, Miriam did. Nana said, learn this now and learn it well, my daughter. Like a compass needle that points north, a man's accusing finger always finds a woman. Always. You remember that, Miriam. You guys are probably feeling a little low right now being male. Pretty harsh message. 2. To Jaleel and his wives, I was a poke root, a mugwort. You too, and you weren't even born yet. What's a mugwort? Miriam asked. A weed, Nana said. Something you rip out and toss aside. So notice this is in the probably early 60s, right? Because Miriam was born in 1959. So we're starting this novel in Herat, kind of, 50 years ago. Let's see. Miriam frowned internally. Jaleel didn't treat her as a weed. He never had, but Miriam thought it was wise to suppress this protest. Unlike weeds, I had to be replanted, you see, given food and water on account of you. This was the deal Jaleel made with his family. Nana said she refused to live in Herat. For what? To watch him drive his Kinchini wives around town all day? She said she wouldn't live in her father's empty house either in the village of Goldaman, which sat on the steep hill 2 kilometers north of Herat. She said she wanted to live somewhere removed, detached, where neighbors wouldn't stare at her belly, point at her, snicker, or worse yet, assault her with insincere kindnesses. And believe me, Nana said, it was a relief to your father having me out of sight. It suited him just fine. It was Mushin, Jaleel's eldest son, by his first wife, Khadija, you guys are going to have to help me with all my pronunciations, who suggested the clearing. It was on the outskirts of Goldaman. To get to it, one took a rutted uphill dirt track that branched off the main road between Herat and Goldaman. The track was flanked on either side by knee-high grass and speckles of white and brown. Speckles of white and bright yellow flowers. The track snaked uphill and led to a flat field where poplars and cottonwood soared and wild bushes grew in clusters. From up there, one could make out the tips of the rusted blades of Goldaman's wood mill on the left, and on the right, all of Herat spread below. The path ended perpendicular to a wide, trout-filled stream, which rolled down from the Safidko mountains surrounding Goldaman. 200 yards upstream, toward the mountains, there was a circular grove of weeping willow trees. In the center, in the shade of the willows, was the clearing. Jaleel went there to have a look. When he came back, Nana said, he sounded like a warden bragging about the clean walls and shiny floors of his prison. And so your father built us this rat hole. Nana had almost married once when she was 15. The suitor had been a boy from Shindand, a young parakeet seller. Miriam knew the story from Nana herself, and though Nana dismissed the episode, Miriam could tell by the wistful light in her eyes that she had been happy. Perhaps for the only time in her life, during those days leading up to her wedding, Nana had been genuinely happy. As Nana told the story, Miriam sat on her lap and pictured her mother being fitted for a wedding dress. She imagined her on horseback, smiling shyly behind a veiled green gown, her palms painted red with henna, her hair parted with silver dust, the braids held together by tree sap. She saw musicians blowing the shani flute and banging a dolhol drums, street children hooting and giving chase. Then, a week before the wedding date, a jinn had entered Nana's body. This required no description to Miriam. She had witnessed it enough times with her own eyes. Nana collapsing suddenly, her body tightening, becoming rigid, her eyes rolling back, her arms and legs shaking as if something were throttling her from the inside. The froth at the corners of her mouth, white, sometimes pink with blood, then the drowsiness, the frightening disorientation, the incoherent mumbling. When the news reached Shindand, the parakeet seller's family called off the wedding. They got spooked, was how Nana put it. The wedding dress was stashed away. After that, there were no more suitors. Anybody recognize what was happening to Nana? what the jinn might be? Anybody ever heard of epilepsy? No? Okay. So epilepsy is a medical condition that causes seizures. And it's controllable now by medicine. But in an era where people didn't understand what was happening, and it would kind of seem like you'd just been possessed, right? By some demon has possessed you and you're rolling around on the ground. I had a friend in middle school who had epilepsy, and it can be pretty scary to watch, actually. And they can really get hurt because it just happens at any particular moment, and they, can hit their head on a table. They're also not allowed to drive. So if you have epilepsy, you can't get a driver's license, which kind of makes sense. If you had an attack, a seizure while you're driving, it would be a problem. Yeah. So one of the women that worked for my father, she had epilepsy, so her husband had to drive her everywhere. So that's what is happening to Nana. Yes, Nazanin, do you have a question?
Yes, teacher. I couldn't hear you clearly, so can you tell me that what is your interpretation from Jean and actually what happened to Nana, because I couldn't understand exactly.
Yes. So she had a seizure, and one of the so a seizure means that your brain takes over, you totally lose control of your body. Sometimes they even bite their tongues, and so they can't, and so one of those conditions is called epilepsy. And so it means that it happens over and over and over again. So, but it does seem like somebody has possessed their body, because they're completely, more often than not, they wake up from it and they don't have any recollection of it either. Like they have no memory of it. So it's just a medical condition, but for a superstitious person, they might think that they had been possessed by a demon.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, teacher.
Yes. What then? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep. When you can't control it. Yeah. Okay, let's see, with 5 minutes. We can quickly finish chapter 2 here. In the clearing, Jalil and 2 of his sons, Farad and Mushnin, built the small kolba where Miriam would live the first 15 years of her life. They raised it with sun-dried bricks and plastered it with mud and handfuls of straw. It had 2 sleeping cots, a wooden table, 2 straight-back chairs, a window, and shelves nailed to the walls where Nana placed clay pots and her beloved Chinese tea set. Jalil put in a new cast iron stove for the winter and stacked logs of chopped wood behind the kolba. He added a tandoor outside for making bread and a chicken coop with a fence around it. He brought a few sheep, built them from a feeding trough. He had Farad and Mushim dig a deep hole 100 yards outside the circle of willows and built an outhouse over it. Jalil would have hired laborers to build the kolba, Nana said, but he didn't. His idea of penance. In Nana's account of the day that she gave birth to Miriam, no one came to help. It happened on a damp, overcast day in the spring of 1959, she said, the 26th year of King Zahir Shah's mostly uneventful 40-year reign. She said that Jalil hadn't bothered to summon a doctor or even a midwife, even though he knew that the jinn might enter her body and cause her to have one of her fits in the act of delivering. She lay all alone on the kolba's floor, a knife by her side, sweat drenching her body. When the pain got bad, I'd bite on a pillow and scream into it until I was hoarse, and still no one came to wipe my face or give me a drink of water. And you, Miriam Jo, you were in no rush. Almost 2 days, you made me lay in that cold, hard floor. I didn't eat or sleep. All I did was push and pray that you would come out. I'm sorry, Nana. I cut the cord between us myself. That's why I had a knife. Sorry. Nana always gave a slow, burdened smile here, one of lingering recrimination or reluctant forgiveness. Miriam could never tell. It did not occur to young Miriam to ponder the unfairness of apologizing for the manner of her own birth. By the time it did occur to her, around the time she turned 10, Miriam no longer believed the story of her birth. She believed Jalil's version. that though he'd been away, he'd arranged for Nana to be taken to a hospital in Herat, where she had been tended by the doctor. She had lain on a clean, proper bed in a well-lit room. Jalil shook his head with sadness when Miriam told him about the knife. Miriam also came to doubt that she had made her mother suffer for 2 full days. They told me it was all over within under an hour, Jalil said. You were a good daughter, Miriam Jo. Even in birth, you were a good daughter. He wasn't even there, Nana spat. He was in Taket Safar, horseback riding with his precious friends. When they informed him that he had a new daughter, Nana said Jalil had shrugged, kept brushing his horse's mane, and stayed in Taket Safar another 2 weeks. The truth is, he didn't even hold you until you were a month old, and then only to look down once, comment on your longish face, and hand you back to me. Miriam came to disbelieve this part of the story as well. Yes, Jalil admitted he had been horseback riding in Taket Safar, but when they gave him the news, he had not shrugged. He had hopped on the saddle and ridden back to Herat. He had bounced her in his arms, run his thumb over her flaky eyebrows, and hummed a lullaby. Miriam did not picture Jalil saying that her face was long, though it was true that it was long. Nana said she was the one who'd picked the name Miriam because it had been the name of her mother. Jalil said he chose the name because Miriam, the tuberose, was a lovely flower. Your favorite? Miriam asked. Well, one of, he said and smiled. Okay. I'm going to stop there. We'll pick this up again tomorrow in class. Was today Tuesday? Yeah, and hopefully Fariba Mohibi will be able to make her presentation. Just so you know how I plan to go forward, at certain points, and I'll give you a warning of that, but at certain points, after a certain number of chapters, I will have you take a quiz on it, which will be writing about what we have read. I will be giving you some questions and then you will write about it. We'll have to figure out how best to get those questions to you guys in Kabul, but I'm hoping that you can get into your Word documents and you can write your answers there. And I can kind of send the questions over on chat. But that is how we'll be moving along and how I will be asking you to really think about what it is you're reading. Okay, and we'll talk also tomorrow about the sort of elements of fiction to be kind of looking out for. Okay. Any questions?
Okay, teacher.
Okay. All right, then I'm going to sign off for today. Nice job presenting, ladies, and I will see you all tomorrow.
Bye.
Okay, teacher.
Bye.
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 Bye.